Welcome back to another episode of Politics Unfiltered. As always, thank you all for rocking with us week after week, every Monday when we drop new episodes. We have a special guest here with us today, Tennessee State Representative Gabby Salinas. Gabby, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be home, and it's great to be with one of my constituents.
That's right. I actually had an opportunity to cast a vote for Gabby. Makes it all the more merrier. So when people say, do you talk to your elected officials? Yes, absolutely. My state representative is sitting right here with me right now.
I'm happy to be here.
Gabby, thank you for coming on to the show. I wanted to invite you on because right now we're seeing a lot across the country, especially when it comes to immigration, especially when we see Republican state legislatures bending the knee to the president, and just the madness that's happening in politics. So I wanted to bring a state representative on, but not just any state representative, because you're a history maker in your own right. You're not just my state representative, but you're a history maker in your own right. You're a historic representative for my district, and I'll give you an opportunity to kind of share some of your background with our listeners and our viewers, because this is both streaming on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube, so people get a chance to see you too.
Sounds good.
So do you want to tell them a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So my family immigrated to Memphis in 1996. And I am very much a product of the things that have happened to me and the times that I grew up in. In 1996, Clinton was in the White House, and my family was faced with very difficult moments because I had been diagnosed with bone cancer. And in a time of great despair and hopelessness, my family found hope here in Memphis, Tennessee, thanks to St. Jude and the work that they have done. And I don't think sometimes we often don't think about St. Jude as a civil rights organization, but they were one of the first hospitals that was desegregated in the South.
I didn't know that.
So that has had a huge impact in my view of the world and my view of Memphis and what I think is the pride of not only Tennessee, but our country and the world, and the potential that is here in our homes, in our home city. So I came to St. Jude, and that was year 1996, and there was something else big that happened that year at the hospital, and that was when Peter Doherty won the Nobel Prize. So we had a Nobel Prize winning scientist working at St. Jude. And I remember him walking down the hallways, and everybody wanted to talk to him and wanted to get his autograph. So I thought he was such a rock star. And I asked my family and my parents, well, what does he do? And he's like, well, he's a scientist. And I was like, what kind of scientist? I want to know. I want to be like him. And that really shaped my career trajectory, because I grew up watching them at work. And I think since I can remember, I wanted to be a scientist. And growing up with a pre-existing condition, because I had cancer 3 times, in a time before the Affordable Care Act passed, before there was a Barack Obama as president, and really facing the limitations and the discrimination that was allowed by our laws that said, if you have a pre-existing condition, you cannot get coverage. And for me, having so many healthcare needs at such a young age, I was like, I just felt it in my bones, the inequity of it. It's like, how is this possible? And I think the opposition sometimes wants you to feel isolated, like you're an exception. This doesn't apply to everybody else. You're just different, right? And as I got involved and started to advocate and say hey, this is not fair, I started to notice that a lot more people had pre-existing conditions, and that everything was a pre-existing condition. That if you had depression, if you had being a woman and having a baby,
was like double the disparity for you being a woman and having a pre-existing condition.
So I was like, well, there's a lot more people that are being denied care here. That it's not just an outlier. That if you had pediatric cancer, that's you're a special case and you're in the minority. No, it was a lot of Americans that were really struggling to make sure that their family and themselves could get the care that they needed. And Barack Obama decided to run for president. This was when he was in the primary with Hillary Clinton. And both of them said that they were going to make healthcare a part of their platform. That was like, I was in college at the time. So I was like, well, then I need to get involved. And so that's where I started to follow federal politics and figure out what can we do about our healthcare laws and making sure that people have access to a affordable healthcare. And for me, that's still a big part of why I am in politics, is to make sure that everyday people have access to healthcare. Because there's a saying in Spanish is, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about the ability to work and be a contributing member of society. It becomes a lot harder if you don't have your health. How are you supposed to go to work if you're not feeling well and you can't get your prescriptions filled? How are you supposed to be a good parent if your healthcare needs aren't being met? How do you do well in school if you're a student? If you don't have the prescription glasses and the hearing aids and everything that goes into being a healthy person. So that really politicized me. And I remember at that time I graduated from Christian Brothers University with a degree in biochemistry. I was working at St. Jude, and I really wanted to go to graduate school. And the Affordable Care Act, pre-existing conditions kicked in immediately after it passed for pediatric patients, but it didn't kick in until 2014 for adults. And I had just missed that deadline because I was already an adult. And that's when the Supreme Court decided that it would not be up to the governors to participate in Medicaid expansion. Yeah. And I was like, oh, no. We went from this is the law of the land to now we have 50 targets to hit across the entire United States to make sure that this law is rolled out in a way that works for people. And I knew Tennessee was going to be tough. And that's what brought me into local politics. I was in a lot of these rooms when a lot of the decisions were being made. One of the decisions that really hurt us was when the House and the Senate decided that it would not be up to the governor to decide, that it would be to the House of Representatives and the legislative branch and the senators to.
Because at the time we had a Republican governor who wanted to expand Medicaid, right? Or was it Haslam?
Yeah.
Haslam, yeah.
Yeah. So I had been working with the Hospital Association and many, many, many groups that wanted to see Medicaid expansion. And at that time, we passed resolutions across the state saying people voicing their opinion on Medicaid expansion. And here in Shelby County, we had a 13-0 vote. There's not many things that get 13-0 vote. And we had a Republican mayor. So here we have all of Shelby County is in agreement. All Shelby County leadership is in agreement. Yet our senator, who was Brian Kelsey at the time, who was my senator, argued against the best interest of people from his county. And to me, that was not acceptable. And that's what got me interested in running in the Senate. I ultimately lost that campaign, but then went on to run again. And I think my political trajectory is important to highlight that sometimes you don't win or succeed in the first time, but the values, the things that we're fighting for are worth the fight, and that we cannot give up, on each other, and we cannot, most importantly, give up on the issues that we're fighting for.
Yeah. So you're an immigrant. You're from Bolivia.
Yes.
An immigrant, 3-time cancer survivor, a scientist, and a woman, a Latina. The first Latina representing House District 97. Are you first Latina woman elected in Tennessee altogether?
Democrat.
First Democratic Latina woman elected in Tennessee. So, that history is there. It has shown from start to finish you have had this yearning to fight for people. The thing that got you involved in this, that not expanding Medicare and health and people having not just health care, but access to quality health care, because there's a difference.
Yes.
You can give anybody health care. Having access to quality health care is a big difference. So that kind of drove you. Is that still driving you as a state legislator now?
Yes, absolutely.
Because still to this day, our state legislature, years later, still haven't expanded Medicaid. The governor still haven't expanded Medicaid.
Yeah, and we're losing out on $1.4 billion that we are paying a year of money that we are paying. Our taxes went up when the Affordable Care Act passed. And, for me, I'm happy to pay more in taxes if it means that we have working hospitals. And we lead the country in hospital closures. If it means that more Tennesseans are going to have a working hospital in their community where if someone gets a heart attack or someone wants to have a baby, they have somewhere to go, that is something that most of Americans want to do, right? We would rather see our money go there. And absolutely, it's something that still drives me because we just saw, we're in a shutdown right now over healthcare.
Yeah.
Over trying to increase the premiums for people that are part of the exchange.
Because a lot of people thinking about this shutdown and the SNAP conversation has kind of galvanized what we're seeing right now publicly. But in reality, this is really about making sure that people can still afford health care starting January 1st, 2026. Because right now, people are getting letters from their insurance company saying that your premium is going to go up 100%, 200%, which is going to put us back in the same predicament we were in. People can't afford health care. They're going to just drop it and they're going to say, fuck it. I don't need it. I don't want it. And they're going to be out here not doing any preventative care, showing up at the ER when they get sick.
And then we end up footing the bill.
We end up footing the bill, or they end up going bankrupt.
Yep.
Or even if you get the treatment, you can't afford the prescriptions that come with it because they're so high.
Yeah, and it's one thing that is important to highlight is that 2/3 of people that are in medical bankruptcy have health insurance. So it's not enough just to have health insurance. We need to make sure that health insurance is covering the necessities of people. And if it's not, I'm a big proponent of single-payer health care. I think that we as a country are really far behind when it comes to providing for the health of our people. So that is one of the fights. Obviously, that's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that we should be working towards, in my opinion. And, there's people that disagree, but for me, it's such a fundamental part of being in community and making sure that we're taking care of each other.
Do you see any chance, any hope, any little ray of sunshine that the Republicans who you're working with and this Republican supermajority in Tennessee right now has any desire, any appetite for wanting to do something about healthcare?
There are some people in the House of Representatives and some people that are Republican in the Senate that do support Medicaid expansion. I think the leadership does not, but we have an opportunity with the upcoming gubernatorial race to change that. I think that we are not as far as we were when we had Governor Haslam, but that doesn't mean that we are going to give up, especially, this is one of the things that I argue to my colleagues is that, listen, a lot of people, for some reason, they have some biases against Memphis. And I really don't know how or why, and I don't get it because I love Memphis. And one of the things that I say to them is like, my people in my district, they're going to be fine. At worst case scenario, they have to drive maybe 10 minutes extra to get to a hospital. If it comes down to it and it comes down to an emergency, there is many emergency rooms that the people of Memphis can access. That's not the case in your district. That's not the case for your people that you're supposed to be serving.
Yeah, and many people lose their lives that they meet their demise in the back of an ambulance trying to get from a rural community into a city 100 miles away just to get healthcare treatment.
Yeah. And that is something that I think bringing that to the forefront of their minds is important. And the few Republicans that do support Medicaid expansion in the House that I've had conversations with, some of them definitely have personal stories because they've had a family member be in that situation, or a constituent, or someone they love and care about. So I think that, yes, this impacts Memphis because we have a large number of uninsured people, including veterans, that would benefit from Medicaid expansion. But the brunt of not having access to health care, even emergency care, is really carried by rural people. And I don't think that they can hold on to this argument much longer while they watch hospitals close and their people struggle.
You know, I would just like to be a fly on the wall. I bet you it's intimidating to some of the guys in the state legislature to have a scientist really breaking it down to them, and when the logic that they use in most cases don't make a lick of sense. To have a scientist actually breaking it down to them, why this is important is probably very interesting to watch.
I don't think they know what to do with me.
But one of the best things that could happen, and I think you would agree, is for the folks in Tennessee to do what Mississippi just did in this election, is to elect some more folks to the state legislature and break this Republican supermajority so that they'll have to come to the table and do some willing and dealing with the Democrats to get legislation passed. You agree or no?
Yes, absolutely. And you're a former chair. I'm a former chair of the Shelby County Democratic Party. And we have been trying to break the supermajority, which is something that Mississippi was just able to accomplish yesterday. The most extreme policies that are being proposed and carried out right now, those would be off the table if we had more numbers. It would mean that a lot of our bills would have discussions in committees because we would be able to have more people at the committee level and get seconds. And if something can get out of subcommittee and into committee and into the floor, that is already a win because we can make our case to the public and to the people. But right now, oftentimes what happens is that you go to present your bill in X subcommittee and there'll be one Democrat in there that's like, I move for us to take this up. And there's no second.
Everybody just sit there silent. All the rest of Republicans just sit silent.
And we don't get to even talk about our proposals.
Which is unfortunate for the democratic process. Unfortunate for the legislating process. Unfortunate for people who actually depend on lawmakers to do the hard work of working through and having conversations around the tough issues.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, nobody picked up the phone, so we just hang up.
Yeah, and so I know for people, sometimes it can seem like, oh, well, we're so far away from 50%, or we're so far away from being able to make a difference on these issues because the numbers are so lopsided. But if we get one more vote per subcommittee, that changes the entire conversation.
Yeah, it can make a difference. And it would really put some of these Republican legislators on the spot back home in their own districts.
Yes.
Because they would have to take a hard vote on some stuff.
Yeah. And the rules that we're operating under really puts us as at a disadvantage because it used to be unlimited number of bills that you could sponsor. Then they brought it down to 15. Then they brought it down to 12. I'm hearing that they're going to bring it down to 10.
Gosh.
And that really is only a limit for Democrats because by virtue of having certain leadership positions, the Republicans get unlimited number. So because they have the speaker gets unlimited number of bills. Every committee chair...
He can carry anybody's bill.
He can carry anybody's bill. And then the committee chairs get, I think it's 5 more bills per committee chair. All the committee chairs are Republican. So this cap that we're talking about only exists for Democrats.
Yeah.
So if we get one more person, that's 10 more bills we can talk about.
That is true. Let me ask you something. you're an immigrant. Right now, we're seeing a lot around immigration in the country. I mean, you've seen these images. I've seen these images. You've seen these images. When you see images like what's coming out of Illinois, what's coming out of immigration courts, the way young immigrants are being tackled in the streets, how does that make you feel as an immigrant?
It hurts my heart because that hasn't been my experience. That's not what I thought it meant to be an American. That when my family came here, I always remind my colleagues that there was a time where I didn't speak English. They're like, their mind is blown. They're like, well, you don't even have an accent. And I was like, I was an ESL student, many of which they are trying to make sure those kids don't have access to education, right? That's one of the things they're prioritizing. So when they're talking about that, I'm like, you're talking about people like me. And I always say to them, I'm like, I will be indebted to our community here in Memphis, to our state, and to our country because it gave me a chance to live. And there's no way to repay that. There's absolutely and I can spend the rest of my life trying to give back, and that will still not be enough. And I know that many immigrants feel the same way about a country that has given them the opportunity and a chance to live. That it doesn't matter where you come from, who you love, or what you have been through. That you can make it. You can make it, and you're going to have a fair shot at it. And that's what it used to be an American. And what we're seeing, and we were in court earlier, and what I'm seeing, the argument that the Republican side is putting forth, it digs down deep into the foundation of who we are, or who I thought we were, and who many people thought we were, right? And I also remind them that it was the Republican Party that gave path to citizenship for many immigrants under the Bush administration and under the Reagan administration. It was a Republican senator that sponsored the bill that allowed my family to stay in the United States. So we have found common ground on this issue in the past, and I feel in my heart that we can find that common ground again.
Yeah, the only thing that has changed is the name Trump. The name and the power given to Donald Trump and whatever mission that he's been on. I did an episode in the beginning of this podcast that I call Deported Dreams, because there are a lot of people who are being deported who have so much to contribute to our country, who have contributed things to our country. And for no fault of their own, this president and Stephen Miller and all the rest of the hellraisers that are around them, the Christy gnomes of the world who don't understand anything about immigration, have been handed the reins and told to run wild. And it's been unfortunate to see these scenarios play out all across our country. But there's some immigrants who are moving the needle and showing that there's a place in America for everybody, a nation built by immigrants for immigrants, at the expense of Native Americans in a lot of cases, but a nation really lifted up by immigration and forceful, whether it was slaves being brought to this nation against their own will, they would still be considered immigrants. Whether or not it was people getting on boats trying to flee what was happening in Europe, it would still be considered immigrants. Whether it was people making the trek up south, Central America to the United States, still immigrants. So to see people going through those things, but still seeing leaders like you be able to emerge is a reminder that there is still hope. In the recent New York election, I mean, we saw with our own eyes the power of people really galvanizing around leaders who make a difference, people who make a difference, and we see Mom Dunny as the new mayor of New York City. How does that make you feel, especially as an elected immigrant in this country?
I think it puts into perspective what's possible in our country, and that that immigration is such a central part of who we are. And to have, someone that's leading one of the largest cities in the largest city in our country be an immigrant in this moment in time is, I think, important, and it's exciting to see. And, I think it shows that we care about service and that we are willing to put ourselves up for service. And that includes political office.
Yeah, I was to say, even in the face of the vitriol,
Yeah.
Being able to step up and serve.
Yeah, and I think it's so nice to see, because I think that is a way of going beyond stating our values and actually showing our values.
That right now, you're part of a lawsuit to get National Guard troops from the National Guard removed from the city of Memphis, which we've seen our National Guard be kind of wielded around by the governor in a number of ways. He sent them to the southern border. He sent them to Washington, D.C. Now he's deployed them into Memphis at the request of President Trump. And for many people, there's an uneasiness because what we've seen federal law enforcement and National Guard troops essentially become is like a reconnaissance force for ICE, where Black and brown people, especially immigrants, are now, in the crosshairs of these folks who we've allowed to just come into the city.
And let's not forget where we are. We're in Memphis, Tennessee. This is the National Guard was sent in after Martin Luther King was murdered here. There are people around in our city that remember that. And it's not a good memory because of the violence that was experienced at the hands of law enforcement and other armed services. This is the city where Tyree Nichols was murdered by law enforcement. So this is stuff that is that we have lived, we witnessed, we have seen. And I think that there was a effort to try to improve and restore some semblance of trust in law enforcement. That has, I think, in my opinion, gone out the window because of the abuse of power that the governor as well as the president have engaged in. So we're already a city that is struggling with these dynamics, and then to have zero care and of that. And if you really want to address crime, you should care about that, because when people fear law enforcement, they don't report crime. When they don't report crime, criminals go free, right? So when you collaborate with ICE, that makes no one safe, because it makes people scared to report crime. And that not only does it do that, but criminals know this. Yeah. They know this, so they target already vulnerable communities. So they target Black communities, they target Latino communities and other immigrant communities because they know they're not going to report it.
What do you say to those? What do you say to those, immigrant families, especially those, young people, young immigrants, those who may have been brought here by their families because they wanted a better future for them, and those who have gone through, even those who've gone through the process that the Supreme Court has now flipped on them, and they're afraid to even go to immigration court for their hearings. What do you say to young people who look, towards you and ask that question, like, what should we do when they're yearning for a direction? Should they go back to a country that they don't know or recognize, or should they stay here and try to, continue reaching for the stars and trying to achieve the American dream? What do you say to immigrants?
Well, I'm not someone that can make those decisions for an individual. And I think that they have been put in a really bad situation. But what I say to them would be to not lose hope, because there are people in our community and in government and in elected positions that do care, that do want to see a pathway to citizenship for people that are contributing members of our society, that do want to make sure that that we are giving people a fair shot and that we respect human rights, and that not only do you have people that believe that, but there are people like me and all the plaintiffs in this lawsuit that are willing to use every single tool that we have at our disposal to make sure that we check the abuse of power of the governor and the president. And to my colleagues that are in the House of Representatives and in any elected position, it is important that we move beyond talking points, that we exercise some courage and do the right thing. And, that not only does our future depend on it, but if you don't prioritize the future, I think your next election depends on it.
I want to ask you two questions before we get out of here. Abrego Garcia. Did you ever imagine when all of the chaos around Abrego Garcia started, did you ever imagine that his fate would end up in a court in Tennessee?
No, so this year, so it's been less than a year that I got sworn in. It feels like forever. So much has happened. And Monday was the third time I've been to a courthouse as a result of some high-profile thing that is happening that involves Tennessee.
Yeah.
The first one was Glenn Cassida's case. Second one was Kilmer's case. And then the third one was our lawsuit against the deployment of the National Guard. And it's like, wait, I only got sworn in January and so much has happened already.
Yeah.
And, this is, they're trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And we saw that in the Kilmer Abrego Garcia is like, okay, well, we can't keep him there. We have to bring him here. We have to figure out what we're going to do with him. And in a way, figure out how we're going to punish someone because they made us look bad. Right. And that is this guy, if you look at what he did in comparison to what the speaker did and why he's no longer in office and the fact that some of those people are going to jail.
Yeah.
When you compare those two things, here's a hardworking person that came to our country that was trying to do things right, yet we're having a hard time even keeping him in the country versus someone that has been convicted and found guilty of taking money from taxpayers.
While sitting in one of the highest seats of power in the state.
Yeah. And that's the moment we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
That hardworking people can't get a fair shake while politicians can commit crimes and still hold on to power.
And if you're Brian Kelsey, you get a pardon.
Yeah.
Black and brown women who are serving in Congress, who are serving in state legislatures across the country, immigrants who are serving in elected office, period, finding themselves in the crosshairs of the president, whether you're members of the squad or whether you're Mondani. Do you ever see a moment where you feel fearful of being in the role?
I see some of the reactions of my colleagues and the way they sometimes look at me, or if they hear me speak Spanish, or if so many people, and I feel a tremendous sense of honor to get to be in this role at this moment because I know it's giving a lot of people hope, whether they may be Latino or not. And I see the people that go into my office, and I love welcoming anyone and everyone that wants to stop by. So I see their joy, and then at the same time, when we're on the floor, I see the reactions of my colleagues, and oftentimes it's like a reaction of disgust or like,
yeah,
what are they doing here, right? Or what is she doing here? Or what are they doing here too? And for me, it's been more about trying to elevate people that perhaps they can relate to that don't agree with them. So one of the big honors that I had this past session was having my ESL teacher sit up in the balcony and getting her to shout her out. And I told her, I was like, Ms. Hill, if you could say anything to these people, what would you say? And she's a native Tennessean from West Tennessee, lives in Franklin, is represented by one of the most conservative members of the House, Lee Reeves, who's in my freshman class. And, she sent me a little blurb about the students that she taught. And I said, she lives in your district, Representative Reeves. So I'm like, there are people that look like you, that live in community with you, that do not agree with you. So having an opportunity to highlight those people is one of the ways that I try to get through.
One other final question I got for you. Seeing what happened in this past election, Mississippi, Georgia, Virginia, New Jersey, I mean, Democrats overperforming by loops and hurdles what was predicted, what the polls were saying. Seeing that level of strength executed by the party on election night, it's made me feel hopeful that a blue wave is surely, beginning to roll towards the country in 2026. But as a state legislator in a state where there's a Republican supermajority, and you've been in roles where you've run for office and tried to break that majority, where you have been an advocate, where you have led from the Democratic side to try to help break that supermajority. And we both know that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough work. Do you think, or do you feel hopeful that Tennessee will begin to turn the tide and feel even some offsprings of that blue wave? Do you think in 2026 could be the year for us?
I feel hopeful, but the Bible says faith without works is dead.
That is true.
We have to put in the work, and that's important. And we can't do it alone. For sure, we can't do it alone. So not only do we have to do our part, but to anyone that's listening that does not live in Tennessee, that cares about these issues, that cares about Black and brown communities, that cares about healthcare, you can't ignore the South, and you cannot ignore Tennessee.
Yeah.
Our opposition right now is looking to make sure that they can challenge Plyler versus Doe, and that will become the law of the entire country. So what does that mean? It means that school districts will be required to present or to examine someone's documentation status as in order to sign them up for a public education. This goes against the United Nations. This goes against what the United Nations has established is a fundamental right for a child. This puts us on par with countries that engage in child labor. And if we can't stop this in Tennessee, it will go to the Supreme Court and it will become the law of the land. So I say this to say that when we build coalitions, we need help here in Tennessee. We need help. So yes, it's important to have these wins in the East Coast and the West Coast and in these swing districts that are in these swing states. But we cannot ignore the South, and we cannot ignore Tennessee. In the same way that the Dobbs decision changed the entire dynamic for the entire country when it comes to access to reproductive health care and an abortion, that is what we're faced with when it comes to immigration. That is what we're faced with when it comes to education. So as these platforms and these coalitions start to form, ask yourself, what are we doing to help the South, and what are we doing to help states like Tennessee?
Well, thank you, Representative. And to those of you who have been listening in, who have been watching, if you're watching on YouTube, this is just a reminder that if you dream, there are unlimited possibilities, but you have also have got to work, and you have got to be willing to fight and stand up even in the face of adversity. You have got to be willing to plant your feet to take a stand for what you believe in. Representative Salinas is fighting with so many other representatives from across the state and around the country for what's right. And as citizens, we have to do our part because, as we've heard before, especially I think President Obama loves to say this, the most important position you get to hold in society is the position of citizen, because you have the power to decide who actually leads the country, leads your community, leads your state. So as a reminder, never, never give up that power. You can't be complacent. You can't just tolerate and go along with what you're getting because you believe that you don't have the power. Exercise your right. We have some big elections coming up in 2026. Make sure that you're using your voice, that you're researching candidates, but most importantly, that you're also getting involved. Volunteer. Become an advocate for your community. I'm Hendrell Remus, and this is another episode of Politics Unfiltered. I'm out.